SC, may you please confirm that the person appearing before us is the person that you and us expected to be here today?
Good morning, Honourable Chair, Honourable Members, Ms. Johnson, everyone in the room, colleagues. Yeah, I can confirm, Honourable Chair, that that is indeed Ms. Advocate Anthea Johnson, the head of IDEC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, SC. Let me move to the next item, which is the administration of oath on our witness. Good morning once again, Ms. Johnson. Before I administer oath, allow me to read the following to you. That you have been invited to appear before this ad hoc committee, which investigate allegations made by Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi, and that you have been invited to provide information in relation to the committee's oversight work. The committee is investigating, amongst others, alleged unlawful disbursement of the political killings task team, otherwise known as the PKTT or the NPKTT, and further, the alleged moratorium on the filling of vacancies within the South African Police Services, and alleged corrupt relationships between senior leadership within SAPS and members of the public, as well as political interference in the work of the SAPS. In extending this invitation, the ad hoc committee chairperson has indicated that you may provide such information to the committee if you so wish under oath in terms of the powers, privileges, and immunities of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act 2004. Please be informed that by law you are required to answer fully and satisfactorily all questions lawfully put to you, or to produce any document that you are required to produce in connection with the subject matter of the inquiry, notwithstanding the fact that the answer or the document could incriminate you or expose you to criminal or civil proceedings or even damages. Ms. Johnson, you are, however, protected in that evidence given under oath or affirmation before a House or Committee of Parliament may not be used against you in any court or place outside Parliament except in criminal proceedings concerning a charge of perjury or a charge relating to the evidence or document required in these proceedings. Please be aware that in terms of Section 17(2) of the Powers, Privileges and Immunities of Parliament and Provincial Legislatures Act, a person who willfully furnishes a House or Committee of Parliament with information or makes a statement before it which is false or misleading, commits an offense and is liable to a fine or imprisonment for a period not exceeding 2 years. You are required to take an oath or affirm that the evidence you are about to give is truthful, and so you may elect whether you take oath or affirmation.
Honorable Chair, I'll take the oath.
So, thank you so much. You have decided or elected to to take oath. I will read and you will follow me. You will start by saying I and you state your full names.
I, Andrea Johnson,
Swear that the evidence I shall give
swear that the evidence that I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
And so help me God.
And so help me God.
Thank you so much. I'm going to hand over to you, SC, and I now allocate you between now and 13 hours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I will, as usual, try my level best to conclude by 1300 hours. Thank you, Ms. Johnson, Advocate Johnson, for your appearance today and also for your cooperation, your full cooperation and that of your team, both at the NPA and your council. On a lighter note, your senior counsel, the last time I encountered him was in a boxing matter. In a boxing matter when he was acting for the boxing promoters and I was acting for the previous Minister of Sport. So I hope it's not a scene set to some kind of a sparring that we're going to engage in today. Advocate Johnson, you are the head of the Investigating Directorate Against Corruption. We'll refer to it as IDEC throughout the day, or those questions will be asked of you as head of IDEC, and you were appointed by the President as the head of IDEC on the 1st of March in terms of the National Prosecuting Authority Act. There was an amendment subsequent to your appointment, amendment to the IDEC Act in relation to its independence. Just briefly tell us about that.
Chair, thank you. I was appointed on the 1st of March 2022. At the time, it was not called the Investigating Directorate Against Corruption. It was called the Investigating Directorate, having been created in terms of a proclamation in April of 2019. Fast forward to 2024, and through a parliamentary process, the National Prosecuting Authority Amendment Act 10 of 2024 was passed. It therefore created IDEC, Investigating Directorate Against Corruption, as a permanent entity, which came into effect then on the 19th of August 2024.
Thank you. Now, the events of 6 July 2025, now well known, when Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi had a media briefing. You obviously by now know about that, and that's given rise to the appointment of the ad hoc committee by Parliament, the National Assembly, to inquire into a number of allegations that he made. We're hoping that during the course of your testimony you can assist us on at least 3 aspects of the terms of reference of this committee. The one I know we briefly touched on it, but the 121 case dockets, there was some interaction on that aspect, but more pointedly, paragraph 4.1.12 of the terms of reference, which relates to prosecutorial conduct and the relationship between IDEC and the PKTT, that's the Political Killings Task Team, including whether IDEC or any of its officials unlawfully interfered in police investigations or exceeded its mandate. And then item 4.1.18, which is to scrutinize the interagency coordination among SEPs, crime intelligence, IDEC / the NPA, correctional services, Metro Police, and the legal basis for the directives affecting the PKTT, which is a latter part of that terms of reference. So, but before we get into those specifics, perhaps just talk to us about your experience, your academic qualifications, your appointment as an advocate of the High Court of South Africa, and then your subsequent involvement within the criminal justice system, your initial experiences as a prosecutor, as a district prosecutor, and then your elevation subsequently to a senior state prosecutor, state advocate within the Director of Public Prosecutions.
Thank you, Chair. I do, in terms of the academic qualifications, hold a B.Juris degree and an LLB degree. I would hope that no one wants to know when I got those. They are extremely old. But in 2007, I also attempted and completed in that year a diploma in criminal justice and forensic auditing at the University of Johannesburg. It was part-time. I have various short courses that you complete during the course and scope of your employment, from project management, coaching and mentoring, money laundering, corruption, all of the relevant courses to enable you to do your work, Chair. I started prosecuting on the 1st of June, 1996, at the Magistrates Court in Alberton. I was then moved to the Regional Court in Germiston early in 1998. But in the Magistrates Court, we did the usual matters that are still done, from assault. Unfortunately, back in the day, I also had to do traffic matters. I also had to deal with maintenance issues and got in between spouses and or partners about whose rights it were to pay for the upkeep of their children. But it was as basic as that. I was in the regional court for a very short time, where more serious offenses from cash in transit heists, business robberies, murders, and so on were done. And on the 1st of June, 1998, Chair, I started as a state advocate at the then Attorney General's office in Johannesburg under then Attorney General De Vries. The National Prosecuting Authority came into being in 1998. And in December of 99, I was then promoted to senior state advocate and joined the Directorate Special Operations, colloquially called the Scorpions. I was there till the doors closed.
Who was the head of the Scorpions then?
At the time, in terms of the region, it was Advocate Gerrie Nel, and the Deputy National Director in charge was Advocate Leonard McCarthy. But I reported directly to Advocate Gerrie Nel as head of office. I remained there till the doors closed 6 July 2009. However, in that time, on the 1st of April 2004, I became a Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions. And around about April or May of 2006, I became a Senior Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions, which position I held up until the 28th of February 2022. And I then became the investigating director on the 1st of March 2022. In that time, I held various portfolios as a deputy director, overseeing prosecutions and investigations in the DSO. I was also at the DPP office and fell under what was called the organized crime component, where we dealt with organized crime matters. And from February 2019 till the end of February 2022, I was the National Coordinator Organized Crime at the NPA's head office.
Just the period when you were with the DSO, as you say, colloquially referred to as the scorpions. Just discuss with us some of your experiences there and perhaps some of the more prominent matters or cases you became involved in as a prosecutor.
Honorable Chair and members, when the DSO started initially, it started with organized crime matters. And I think during the course of late 2003, what was then called ITSIO, which was the Investigating Directorate Serious Economic Offences, also came over to the DSO. So the DSO then ended up doing what the HOCs now do: serious organized crime, serious complex, serious commercial crime, serious corruption matters. And that became the ambit of the work that the DSO did. I was mainly involved in organized crime matters, but later on became involved in the serious corruption matters that were done at the DSO. There, much like what IDEC operates now, we had deputy directors who would lead a team, and the team would be comprised of advocates of various rankings, as well as criminal investigators. And we would form a team that would then deal with the matters that were allocated to us. I myself dealt with various matters, not just the corruption matters, but when it came to one of the more prominent matters, one of the matters that I dealt with together with Advocate Herinel was the investigation and prosecution of corruption allegations against the late Jackie Selebi, who at the time was the National Police Commissioner and the first African head of Interpol. And we saw that matter through to its finality. But in that time, Chair, the DSO was disbanded. And so in July 2009, as with most advocates, we were given an opportunity to choose which Director of Public Prosecution's office you would like to work in. Advocate Nell and I, who are Pretoria-based, chose the office of the DPP Pretoria, also because in October of that year, the matter for trial in the Selebi matter had been set down. And so practically it made sense that we would be in our home base and would be able to deal with the prosecution. And that prosecution was then finalized as it was with the guilty verdict being passed against the late Mr. Selebi, together with a term of imprisonment of 15 years. I've dealt over the years with other matters, and I wasn't married only to the corruption matters. We also dealt with some of the murder matters, conspiracies to commit murder, one of those being the matter of athlete Oscar Pistorius. Advocate Nell finished off or chose to leave the National Prosecuting Authority before that matter went back on appeal, and I finalized that matter, and we dealt with various matters over the years. So my experience in terms of matters was mainly organized crime and then into the corruption field.
Have you always been based in Pretoria? You were born in KZN, is it?
That is correct, Chair. My first prosecuting stint on the 1st of June 1996 was at the Magistrates Court in Alberton. For purposes of correctness of the record, I did prosecute on a contract basis in Scottburgh in November, December 95, and January of 96, and then the contract finished. And then I applied to the then Department of Justice and waited for a position, which then became Alberton on the East Rand. I hadn't, other than those 2 or 3 months, prosecuted anywhere in KZN.
Just talk to us briefly about your formative years growing up in KZN.
Honorable Chair, I grew up in rural KZN. It's unfortunate that much of what I experienced then, some of our people still do experience now, which is the lack of running water and ablution facilities. That was the story of the growing up, walking to school at great distances on our rural roads. And there was a time when, fortunately, we were then able to catch a bus and travel great distance to school and back. My only friends at the time, and more so because my late dad was a policeman, in the apartheid era, us as black families were not allowed to be involved in politics, so there was no talk of politics. I had absolutely no political knowledge. I was not politically savvy at all. But we knew that as black people, we stayed together. So we were the only Indian family in that area, and then we had 3 African families, the Shomayos, Keliza, the Keles, and those were our best friends. So I grew up playing with my friends, waited for one another when we came from school. I had a favorite meal at the time, which Mam Keliza used to make, which was samp. I think called them Nusho more now. The kids there had favorite meals at our home. We all also, unfortunately, had to walk to a communal area at the police station to collect water. And so myself and my friends would, without tubs and buckets, get to the communal area, carry buckets and tubs of water on our heads, walk back down, fill up. So I had a very humble rural upbringing. And those were my friends. That is how we grew up. Unfortunately, though, when we went to school, we went to different schools. But after hours, after school, on weekends, that was us, that was family. And that is how we socialized, and that is really my upbringing.
And you also became fluent in isiZulu?
Yes, sir, I did. And if you would allow me, Chair, I taught myself to read. And the one thing I had to read, everywhere I went, I saw a sign. And the sign said, Abahamba kulendlela bayoboshwa. And I needed to know what that meant, because coming or being brought up in rural KZN, there were many farmers. And as we walked those paths from school, that was a very prominent sign. I also had to learn Afrikaans because there was this thing with the dog that said, pas op vir die honde. So that was my first self-taught Zulu speaking and reading. But I'm fluent in Zulu because part of the respect was we taught, myself and my siblings taught my friends English, they taught us isiZulu, and that is how I grew up. Also had to learn Afrikaans, of course, because given what it was at the time, our schools were bilingual, and we had to know English and Afrikaans, because if you failed Afrikaans, you also failed the entire exam. Not just if you failed English, you failed the exam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was the issue that gave rise to, or one of the issues was the language issue, the compulsory Afrikaans that you had to do, even as a black person. Anyway, so that was a political education, I suppose, on its own. But just fast forward, so you obviously had to move to the urban areas, go to high school or senior secondary school, go to university, and gain those degrees that you.
Correct. Not as urban. I don't know if you call a little one street village an urban area, but yes, I was able to go to high school in a different area, and I then attended the University of Durban Westville as it was at the time for both my qualifications.
Thank you, Advocate Johnson. Now, just to go to IDEC more specifically, first established in 2019, and I think, as you pointed out, was created or established by a presidential proclamation, and that arose really from the findings and the recommendations of the Zondo Commission.
Correct, Chair. The commission had commenced in 2018, and so that gave rise to the birth of the investigating directorate at the time. And
when it was still known as the Investigating Directorate, that was headed by Advocate Herman Cronje at the time.
Correct, Chair, up until I took office on the 1st of March, 2022.
So subsequent to 2019, your appointment in 2022, and the amendment to the NPA Act, the mandate changed. So just tell us briefly about that? The initial mandate of the investigating directorate and the mandate now of IDEC.
So the initial mandate of the investigating directorate dealt mainly with the commissions of inquiry, to with the party commission that looked into irregularities into the PIC, the Nugent Commission of Inquiry looking into alleged irregularities within the South African Revenue Service, and then the State Capture Commission, colloquially the Zondo Commission. In terms of IDEC, the mandate seeks to also then deal with serious and high-profile corruption matters, also over and beyond the statutory offences one is allowed to look at, POC Datara, PRECA, PFMA, MFMA, POCA contraventions, and then the common law contraventions, fraud, theft, forgery, uttering, and offences that in the main relate to dishonesty, Chair.
And subsequently, the mandate broadened to corruption more generally.
That is correct.
And would you be dealing with more complex cases of corruption?
That is correct, Chair. We are expected to deal with the more complex corruption matters, but that also brings with it, if I may add, in terms of the POCA, which is the Prevention Organized Crime Act, there are also our money laundering obligations. And so IDEC played a very prominent role in ensuring complex investigations, also of money laundering towards the FATF and towards us dealing with the grey listing issues.
Do you only act on matters referred to you, IDEC, or do you have some authority or powers to, as it were, that Latin phrase, mero moto, on your own? Do you take on corruption matters just because you were told about it or read about it in the media? How does that work?
Unfortunately, Chair, the entry into IDEC in terms of matters is very restricted. Yes, those matters that arise out of the 3 commissions, we are able to look into those matters. I would just like to clarify, Honourable Chair and members, that notwithstanding, we do divide up the work also with the DPCI, known as the HOCs, and what we do before we authorize new state capture investigations. We also check with them if perhaps they haven't already commenced investigations in matters that arise out of the State Capture Commission report and findings. Where they do, and they have already commenced, we hand over then a matter that can go in there and falls within the ambit of that specific matter. So we do engage with the HOCs. In fact, there's a weekly meeting that the head of investigations in IDEC attends with the HOCs so that we are able to synergize new matters and where we are with old matters, and whether or not there might be something in either or agency that the other might need in terms of assistance. But when it comes to matters coming into IDEC, even corruption matters, they have to come in through a referral, which is a Section 27 referral in terms of the NPA Act. And the only other way it comes in is if they are referred to the ID and IDEC through the Office of the National Director in terms of Section 28 of the NPA Act. So had it not been for, do you have those dockets? Give them to us. This is corruption. We cannot do that, and we haven't done that. And we cannot also go to the HOCs and say, we want to do this, so give us yours. What does happen is, where the HOCs also have started a matter and they feel that it might be best placed to deal with it in IDEC, there is then that handover and or joint working process. But you cannot just go take a matter. We can't just take over a case, project or docket.
Yeah, I think that explanation is important, and I'm sure will be expanded upon later. But the director of priority crimes, the HOCs, they deal with priority crimes. You deal with serious corruption cases, which would also indicate, or us as members of the public would expect to be dealt with as a priority crime. So you're saying the way you deal with it is you have a regular interaction with the Hawks.
That is correct, Chair, because the Hawks also have a mandate to deal with serious corruption matters. And so that there's no duplication or overlap. That weekly engagement seeks to ensure that that doesn't happen. But there's interagency working where we actually do share resources if they are needed. What IDEC is also able to do, Chair, is if there is a matter in our space, but there's a capability that also lies within the DPCI, we are able to designate those persons into an authorized IDEC investigation. So a DPCI investigator who's not seconded to IDEC can actually be allocated to a matter within IDEC through a designation process.
And we know now from the evidence and from the organizational design structure of the South African Police Services that there are also specialized units. And I think all of us now understand why these special purpose units have been established: murder and robbery, abduction, kidnappings, organized crime, mine killings in the mines, amazamas, and a whole host of specialist task teams, which would also indicate priority and certainly serious crimes. So do you interact at all with those units? And of course, one of those units is the political killings task team unit or task team. Do you interact with those units, or do you act with the national commissioner and his deputies who are heading those units?
To clarify, Chair, in my earlier days as a prosecutor, yes, the specialized task team that I would have engaged with was what was called the SVC, Serious Violent Crime. They mostly dealt with the cash in transit matters, business robberies, and so on. So that was the one specialized unit most of us dealt with. And that would have been the case even throughout my time at head office as National Coordinator Organized Crime. We dealt with the various agencies that dealt with. So within the detectives, for example, as is with the Hawks, they also had specialized teams. They didn't call them task teams, but they had dedicated teams that would work with extortions, dealt with essential infrastructure theft, which was quite an issue. So we worked with teams that dealt with specialized matters. But the only specialized task team I did deal with was the Serious Violent Crime Unit at the time. When I became the head of IDEC and IDEC itself, we only engaged then in terms of law enforcement in the main with the DPCI, which is the Hawks, with the South African Revenue Services, the Financial Intelligence Center, and we also deal with Treasury when we need to, have engagements with the Auditor General's Office, but we haven't had to work with the PKTT because that has nothing to do with our mandate at all. So there's no engagements with them or the work that they do, Chair.
Okay. We'll come to the PKTT a bit later. Just before we go any further, tell us about your office, the makeup of your office, how many people are employed, in which sections, and perhaps also an idea of the demographics in that office.
During a break, I'll be able to perhaps just give the junior counsel something to print out. But as an overview, the staff contingent as of yesterday, which includes myself, are 128. And that includes the investigating director, the head of investigations, 2 chief criminal investigators, 4 chief financial investigators, 4 project managers. And then across the board, we have senior and junior financial investigators, criminal investigators, as well as data analysts, and then senior and junior advocates. So it's a total of 128, 63 female, 65 male.
And the demographic breakdown?
I'll be able to, during a break, I do have it on my laptop. I will look at it and I will revert with the exact numbers of the demographics.
Okay.
And I would assume, you'll correct me, Chair, you are asking about the racial demographics of the office. That's not an issue. I will present it. I do have it on my laptop. I will just want to give you the exact numbers.
And how are people, personnel in IDEC, how are they appointed? Who appoints them?
So, Chair, there's nothing unique about IDEC in terms of the recruitment process. Bear in mind that we are a business unit in the National Prosecuting Authority, which in itself is a program of the Department of Justice. So the recruitment policy in IDEC is the recruitment policy of government as we follow it through the Department of Justice. You all would have to identify vacancies and positions to be filled. And these are then advertised. They are not advertised only internally, they are advertised externally. There's a screening process that gets done outside of my office. It is all corporate services that would do those. Persons are screened to see that they fulfilled the requirements, that they correctly filled in. We still do what they call the Z83 form as a form of employment in government. All of those are done. There's pre-screening, there's shortlisting. And in terms of the shortlisting, demographics play a role, both in terms of gender and color equity. Those are part of the equity principles of the NPA as well as the Department of Justice. So all of those factors are taken into account. A panel is pre-approved. We've got to send an approval for a panel. Also, it has to be constituted in terms of both race, gender, as well as qualifications. You cannot have, for example, myself chairing interviews for a data analyst. I might be out of my depth, but I could chair the interview for an advocate or a deputy director of public prosecutions or the criminal investigators. So we take all of that into account. Our panels are sent through to the NPA's head office, and depending on the level of appointment, some, if not most of those panels also have to be approved in the Office of the Director General of DOJ, as the Director General is the accounting officer of the NPA. And then those panels constitute themselves. Shortlisted candidates are then interviewed, go through a two-pronged interview process, which has also become part of what government requires. Ordinarily, in these kinds of positions, you just had an interview with panelists asking questions and scoring candidates. But where we have, especially the criminal and financial investigators as well as advocates, we have part two of the interview process, where they are either given case theories, scenarios, etc., and they have to then answer those. So there's a written portion and also a question that seeks to determine their level of ethics and integrity in the way they engage with the question. So it's not a different recruitment process. It is a recruitment process that's followed by the department.
Do you, from time to time, chair some of these panels?
Honorable Chair and members, yes, I have. I have chaired panels for deputy directors of public prosecutions. I have chaired the panel for chief criminal investigators, chief financial investigators. I think that's could have been the head of investigations, but I think that is it. I might have assisted where. Oh, yes, I do recall, I think late last year, ordinarily when you do the positions for state advocate or senior state advocate, we usually have a deputy director of public prosecutions chair. The deputy director from my office was assigned to chair, fell ill, quite ill. And so in order not to interrupt that process, we sought permission, as we do, that I take over as chair. But it was for a prosecution position.
Now, your husband is also employed in IDEC?
No.
No, not at all.
My husband is at Crime Intelligence, and he's been there from 7 July 2009 when the DSO disbanded. And so many of the investigators, collectors, operational support were also moved. Many of them then were moved to either state security and or crime intelligence. And that is where he found himself by virtue of the allocation of personnel given the disbandment of the DSO. He was never at IDEC.
So my apologies. I was mistaken. I apologize. So your husband obviously knows and works under Lieutenant General Khumalo, who's the head of crime intelligence.
That is correct, Chair. If I remember correctly, Lieutenant General Khumalo became the divisional commissioner. It would have been late 2022, but my husband had been at crime intelligence from July 2009. But having to work under Lieutenant General Khumalo as the divisional commissioner would have been from around about December or so of 2022, whichever date the divisional commissioner became the divisional commissioner. But he had been at crime intelligence well before then. My husband, I mean.
Now, in the complex, serious work that you do as IDEC, you would require more often than not intelligence which would be collected by crime intelligence, is it, and shared with you? Or do you have your own crime intelligence section?
So, Chair, we do not utilize crime intelligence unless crime intelligence refers a crime threat analysis to us, which is part of the job that they do across the board for law enforcement. So if they had to compile a crime threat analysis that dealt with high-level corruption, organized corruption, and then in terms of the Section 27 referred it to IDEC, we would have looked at it. They hadn't done that to date, but we do not utilize intelligence, Chair. That's where the DSO got into trouble, thinking that intelligence is perhaps something we can do. IDEC will collect information that it can get, and we therefore use the subpoena process in terms of Section 28 that allows us to gather information that we would need to conduct our investigations. So it can be anything from the banks, cell phone service providers, from the revenue service, from the police, and from any person and or entity or agency that may hold the information that we require, and then we conduct our investigations. But there's no intelligence gathering at IDEC.
But when you issue the Section 28 subpoena, it could or may involve the provision of crime intelligence, which could be restricted or confidential. You would have sight of that. I mean, you, IDEC, not you personally necessarily.
So to be clear, Chair, we currently, if you talk of the intelligence field, IDEC has matters relating to state security, and those arise from the State Capture Commission. We have also had Section 27 referrals from state security. When we request information, we invariably first engage by way of letter or meetings. And when we need them for court-directed purposes, we do issue Section 28 subpoenas. So we are mindful in terms of those, Chair, for state security. We have a legal officer that they have identified that we do serve those on. Our letters, however, go directly to the acting DG or DGs, whoever they may be at the time. When we sought information from crime intelligence, the first time that we did seek such information was with regards the Section 27 referral from Mr. Adams, but that information we then subpoenaed the National Commissioner, given the sensitive nature of documents and information in crime intelligence.
So we'll also park that for the moment. So within, or rather your husband's role within crime intelligence, there's some allegations, not confirmed by any concrete evidence, that you do or might share information which only he is privy to with you in your role as head of IDEC. What would your response be to such an allegation?
Absolutely not. And I know that for some, it might be, you got to be kidding, girl. It really is. I really hold my oath of office and integrity very important. In fact, when I was to take up the position as the head of IDEC, it became a reality that in terms of corruption matters, at that time when I took office, there were already corruption matters being investigated by the investigating directorate into criminal allegations, corruption allegations of SEPs. My husband was very mindful. We had a conversation about do what you need to do. That's always been how it has been. I don't need information from Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson doesn't have information to give. I wouldn't ask him for information. Pillow talk gets people killed. That's something we've never done. And that has just been it. And I know that, Honorable Chair and members, it might sound like such a glib answer. It's the true answer. If that is how you operate, you do not have to worry about a comeback. I am aware of the allegations. I think it's natural human nature for people to think that their 1 + 1 makes 2. Unfortunately, in this instance, it does not. We did not ask Mr. Johnson for any information. He didn't share any information. He won't share any information. And just to be clear, even as I sit here, if my husband is not at the Crime Intelligence head office, in all of the more than 20 years that I'm married to him, and in all the time that he's been at Crime Intelligence, I do not know where his office is. It's not my business. So it sounds simple. It is simple, and we've kept it simple.
Thank you. Just discuss just briefly your mandate.
So, Chair, we have set out the mandate.
Yeah, it's from paragraph 20 onwards. So
yes.
Just summarize it.
But in summary, the mandate of IDEC, Honorable Chair and members, is as set out in Section 71A of the National Prosecuting Authority Act. It is, as I indicated earlier, it relates to serious, high-profile, complex corruption matters. But it also deals with commercial or financial crime cases. These could arise from the commissions, Mpati, Nugent, and Zondo. Also matters referred to by the National Director in terms of Section 28(1)(b, and then the Section 27 referrals. And then, like I also indicated earlier, we can also look at common law offenses, fraud, theft, forgery, uttering, and any offense relating to dishonesty. And then there's quite a few statutory offenses, PRECA, POCA, POCTATARA, PFMA, MFMA. So in the main, that would be it. And like I also said earlier, Chair, we also are obligated to deal with the FATF requirements, which therefore deal with the money laundering provisions, which find themselves in the Prevention of Organized Crime Act.
You, at paragraph 23, you deemed it prudent to deal with an allegation made by former Minister Cele that there was no or is no oversight mechanism for IDEC.
That is correct, Chair. I did hear that the then minister indicated that the DPCI has a judge and the police have IPID and IDEC has nothing. When IDEC and when the NPA Amendment Act was passed and came into being in August of 2024, when the bill was signed in May of 2024, part of the provisions was that there would be an IDEC judge. We saw the value therein because we engaged with the DPCI. We had also engaged with IPID. This is also something, now that I think about it, before the bill was passed, the DPCI, SEPs, and IDEC, or the ID at the time, had to engage. Then Minister Kele chaired the meeting. Ministers of Justice attended the meeting, as did the head of the HOCs, then General Labia, the DG and DDGs of Justice, Doc Mashabane and Kale Pillay. I attended as the ID, and the late Advocate Rodney de Kock, representing the senior management of the NPA. And there were various aspects that we had to talk about, that we had to have a gentleman's agreement on, understanding what the implication of a permanent IDEC meant. And one of the issues that then Minister Taylor had raised was oversight. And we had all discussed it, and as part thereof in the bill, we requested that there be a oversight mechanism in terms of a judge to oversee IDEC, all complaints relating to IDEC, from the head through all of its personnel. This part of the program had to be dealt with by the Department of Justice, and the Department of Justice has appointed chair, as you would see in paragraph 11, retired Judge Takalani Joseph Raulinga, as the 24 as the inspecting judge for IDEC, which term commenced on the 11th of October 2025 and is for a period of 5 years. We would have to now engage the honorable judge so that we can work out the operating procedures, etc. But this is a recent appointment, but it was an appointment that was in the making, and the Department of Justice dealt with it. So to be clear, IDEC had no input, nor did the NPA, into choice of judge. The legislative provisions asked for a judge to be appointed, and that falls within the ambit of our minister, and she has duly made that appointment.
So, and that's quite a recent appointment.
That is correct, although it formed part of the legislation that came into effect on the 19th of August 2024. If I may,
yes.
Whilst this process was being dealt with by the Department of Justice, if there were any allegations against any members of IDEC, they would be dealt with. If there were criminal allegations, they are dealt with as the other allegations against NPA employees are dealt with. They go to the police for investigation. If there were issues that related to security of data, state security would become involved. And where there were issues of misconduct, the NPA has within its ambit also of HR, a unit that deals with discipline issues. And there's also the Office of Ethics and Integrity, where complaints could also have been made, just so that we do not create an impression that there was a lacuna in terms of dealing with issues of criminality and or misconduct whilst one waited for the appointment of the judge.
Does the terms of reference or the mandate of the judge, does it also deal with complaints against IDEC or any of its members, like a sort of an ombud kind of role?
It would operate exactly like the DPCI judge. Any and all complaints, be they from the public and or internally, and that is how we see it would operate.
When would you?
Let's see. May we please take Honorable Ngola.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I think the evidence letter did not complete.
Let me welcome you to the meeting. Thank you so much. Good morning. You can go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to be back. I think the evidence letter did not complete the oversight mechanism question. IDEC is established in 2019. The oversight mechanism is discussed in 2024. The inspectorate judge is appointed on the 11th of October 2025, which is less than 30 days ago. Now, from 2019 to up to date, how have IDEC being oversighted? Where did they report? And all that. I think that's the part that is, I think it's incomplete. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Ngole, it's much like what I indicated, that in the time that we waited for the appointment of the judge, we worked as is with all the matters within the NPA. Where there are discipline matters, they are dealt with in the disciplinary process. Where it was an issue that related to a presidential appointment, those matters are escalated as they should be to the office of the president, but there aren't any that I'm made aware of. Where there were criminal allegations, dockets are opened and those would be investigated. And where there might be allegations of compromise of data and information security, we have in the NPA the Risk and Security Division, who work very closely with state security, and those issues would have been or had to have been escalated there. So that is how it did work. But in terms of matters that I became aware of when I started as the head of IDEC or ID in March 2022, we have had disciplinary issues where we've had allegations that arose against, for example, we had an advocate that joined us, but the allegations of corruption and criminality arose from his work at the office of the DPP. However, we dealt with it because we became aware of it. A disciplinary hearing was conducted. The employee was dismissed. And I know that the criminal matter continued in court. I'm not sure how far that matter went, but that was the course of how things were dealt with, Honorable Chair.
Honorable Malema.
Thank you very much, Chair. What is an oversight?
So the Honorable Malema, you ask in terms of the judge?
What is an oversight?
So oversight is where they exercise, so the oversight is making sure that we are doing things within the prescripts of the law and or our mandate, and or in terms of the disciplinary code. That is the oversight as I see it in terms of IDEC and or its employees.
And there was no oversight up until the judge is appointed to deal with oversight. There's no need to be defensive. There was no oversight. That's why now there is an appointment of a judge to make sure there is an oversight, key amongst others to avoid abuse of power by those who are at IDEC.
So, Chair, nothing to defend. I can merely indicate what processes we had in the NPA at the time, from the time the ID was proclaimed in 2019. It had the labor provisions and discipline issues were dealt with there. There are matters where criminal dockets could have been opened, and those would have been investigated outside, either by the detectives or the DPCI chair. In terms of the ethics and accountability, they also fell within the labor division, and then we also had risk and security. So in terms of the general oversight, that was the NPA's mechanisms to deal with the oversight issues. In terms of mandate, Honorable Malema, I'm sure that there would have been criminal allegations that could have been laid by anyone who was aggrieved and felt that IDEC had acted or the ID acted outside of its mandate, but there wasn't a judge. I do agree with you.
There was no oversight as we have it now. That what we have now was not there.
Correct.
To tell us about labor, to tell us even at the Chisanyama, there is a process of dealing with labor issues without having any oversight. So there was no oversight as we have it now.
So maybe if you'd allow me, Honorable Malema, I agree that we now have a judge. However, we were not allowed to do as we pleased if that is the contention. I can only refer to the mechanisms that were in the NPA that were applicable to the ID and IDEC at the time. But you are correct, we only have a judge now.
We only have an oversight by a judge now,
That is
which we didn't
correct.
have.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Yes. Honorable Ngola, you're fine.
No, Chair, we're not. And I take a particular interest in this matter because I'm the chairperson. of-
Honorable Malema, are you satisfied? Okay. You still want to pursue it, Honorable Ngola?
Yes, Chair. Maybe to put it differently, I'm failing to understand what Advocate Johnson is trying to brief us on. Oversight. The point is, where did IDEC report between 2019 and October 2025? It's about close to 6 years now. What was the oversight mechanism in place at that particular time?
Let's do it this way. Advocate Johnson, the first question is, where did you report between 2019 and October 2025?
Honorable Chair and members, the accountability for IDEC, the head of IDEC reports to the National Director in terms of its work and in terms of that oversight, if we want to use that word. So the accountability mechanism for IDEC at the time is in the Office of the National Director.
Next question.
I'm fine, Chair. We'll pursue it further later.
Okay, thank you so much. SC, you may proceed. Thank you so much.
In the short period that Judge Raulinga has been in office, has been appointed, has he received any complaints? And if so, what are the nature of these complaints?
None that we've been made aware of, Chair.
Do you meet with a judge from time to time? Have you met with him since his appointment in October?
No, Chair, we have not.
Is the public aware of his appointment and where to direct any complaints?
Chair, I can only answer in the following way. Judge has been appointed by the Minister of Justice. I'm not sure what his terms of reference are yet, how they've worked that out, but there should be a public indication of the fact that there is a judge. The judge would have to give us the terms of reference, or they should be published through the Department of Justice by the Office of the Minister or the Director General, because that is where the judge sits. What his terms of reference would be, the complaints mechanism, how they report matters, who reports matters. The judge does not account to IDEC at all, or the NPA, but accounts within the Department of Justice.
When and how would the judge's appointment have been made public and announced in the media?
I am unable to assist, Chair. I'm not aware of what the plans of the Department of Justice are to ensure that the public is aware, but it is a critical aspect that the public should be made aware of, because that talks to accountability. People need to know where to go to if they have any complaints about IDEC on its staff, and what the nature of those complaints and or the format should be for the reporting of complaints to the judge.
Would you be able to comment or not on whether senior members of police management or other law enforcement agencies, would they have been aware of his appointment?
I'm unable to comment, sir.
Can we just deal briefly with your experience in two of the more high-profile matters of former or the late General Jackie Selebi and Mr. Solly Lazarus, and their prosecution for corruption, just by way of short background.
Honourable Chair and members, I deal with it very broad strokes at paragraphs 25, 26 and 27 of the affidavit. And just based on our experience, mine included with criminal cases against the late Mr. Jackie Selebi, and it was also with Mr. Solly Lazarus with SAPS procurement, and now with SAPS procurement matters in IDEC. It seems that when the police, and this is in general, not a specific unit, regardless of which component, invites bids for the procurement of services or goods, many people want to participate because they've come to know that the contracts can be very large, and we've seen that play itself out as well in public. They're lucrative. And in terms of the prosecution and investigation in the corruption matter involving the then Chief Financial Officer of Crime Intelligence, Mr. Lazarus, who currently serves a term of imprisonment, Lazarus demonstrated what I referred to above. And during this process, at the time we were in the DSO, it became very apparent, and this is not passage talk, it became apparent through the investigation that officials had learned that if Mr. Lazarus asked something, people were reluctant to say no because he was the CFO. If you wanted something, the CFO got it for you. So you didn't stand in the way of the CFO, and I'm talking about at the time. That specific CFO and others came up with several schemes to ensure gratification to and from parties relevant to the entire procurement and acquisition process. As an example, and one of the main charges against the then CFO, Mr. Lazarus, was they procured vehicles, covert vehicles, and vehicles for crime intelligence. And part of that was him ensuring that his kickback was getting vehicles, one of which he got for his daughter, for which he was charged, and one of which he got for his family members. So there wasn't procurement for procurement and procurement for services for its officials to be able to do the work. At that time, in that specific instance, there was always, what can I get out of it? And those were the instances that we were able to actively pick up in relation to Mr. Lazarus.
Then just to move on also briefly, because you've already touched on it to a large extent, the role of crime intelligence in our whole criminal justice system and how important that is.
So
that you deal with it at paragraphs 28 to 30.
Chair, we must make no mistake that crime intelligence is integral to the fight against crime. It is something that we've always worked with as prosecutors and investigators, especially in the work that I did in my portfolio of dealing with organized crime matters. The DPCI, when the DSO was disbanded, I would attend a lot of their project committee meetings. That is where they discuss which projects to take on, etc. A continued argument that we always had with the DPCI was, if you do not have a credible crime threat analysis from crime intelligence, it is really difficult for you to register projects. And we say that because crime intelligence is very good at coming up, especially for organized crime, with credible crime threat analysis. And this was at the time when we were dealing with organized crime, which I dealt with up until February of 2022. And so it is so that they play a very important role, Honorable Chair, in that they provide for a system that allows for a very credible report of information, which is called a crime threat analysis. It informs law enforcement agencies across the board about possible groupings and syndicates, their criminal activities, the commodities that they may be trading in, and other relevant information. They also deal with transnational organized crime. And so a crime threat analysis from crime intelligence won't restrict itself just to the borders, but if there was something that we needed to know about these syndicates operating outside of our borders, they made that part of the crime threat analysis. I've said it helped investigators and prosecutors. And crime intelligence, without a doubt, is critical to the fight against crime, especially organized crime. I think the only challenge that was found, and that was only based on the Celebi matter that we did, the matter against Solly Lazarus, there was a matter against one Mr. Richard Mkhwanazi, but I haven't dealt with that matter. As critical as their function is, the key challenge that was found during those investigations is accountability for the use of its funds. And unfortunately, secrecy characterizes the utilization of the funds and the procurement. And like I say, Honorable Chair, this was encountered since the time of the Celebi investigation, and we found that fast forward into the Lazarus and the Mkhwanazi era. So I think out of all of this, one hopes that even with this committee, that one finds a balance between their mandate, how it's executed, protecting its COVID mandate, but still that there be accountability for its funding and funding mechanism. And the reason for that, Chair, is not because we need to know about their money. It helps ensure the accountability mechanism, and so that there's no abuse of funds within that system, whether it is for personal gain or otherwise.
Thank you. Can we just move to Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi? Do you know him? How well do you know him?
I guess well is relative, but I've known him for a long time in terms of knowing of him. But in March of 2020, and for about a period of 3 months, I got to work every day with Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi. It was during the period of COVID. He chaired what was called the National Core Command Group, which was a group of generals from the various police components. There were people from the Department of Health. I represented the NPA, etc. And what would happen there, Honorable Chair and members, is when regulations came out, we would have to sit together to see how they would be operationalized, the kind of standing order SAPS would send, and the kind of provisions we would have to send to the prosecutors for the prosecution and investigation of certain matters. So he chaired that meeting. We saw him every day. It was very seldom that General Mkhwanazi did not chair the meeting. It was the odd occasion. But he was there. Is very boots on the ground, committed individual. So I've worked with him in that environment. I came to know of him being the acting National Police Commissioner, but Honorable Chair and members, we didn't engage on that platform. And now in my time as in IDEC, we did engage with General Mkhwanazi. In my time as IDEC, when these investigations of the matters that were referred to IDEC by Mr. Adams, out of habit, what one does is when investigators go into a province and they are going to see police personnel, you will inform the police commissioner, provincial commissioner, as do prosecutors when they appear in a jurisdiction of a director of public prosecutions. So investigators would inform General Mkhwanazi that they were in his province, that they were seeing police officials as potential witnesses. They also, one of the investigators also engaged him, Honorable Chair and members, when we needed issues of clarity. And that is as far as the engagement goes. And the last engagement I had personally with Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi was during the month of June. He had called and I was away for work and unable to to take the call. When I called back, he said, not urgent, we'll talk when you get back. I guess we both got busy. General then did speak to me on the 2nd of July. And on the 2nd of July, it is when the General indicated that he wanted me to talk to somebody about an issue. He sent me the details, but unfortunately, before I don't call anyone. I usually give it to the head of operations, Mr. Sissoko. But before I could do that, the 6th of July media expose by Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi happened, and that was the ambit of our engagements. Our engagement stopped on the 2nd of July.
Now, he makes reference to one of your investigators, Mr. Brian Padiachi. Can you tell us a bit about that? Or let me just put to you two allegations made by Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi in his affidavit. He says a further condition is that if the accused required anything related to their work, it could only be obtained through the intervention of the investigating officer. This is in relation to Lieutenant General Kumalo, Senior Investigator Brian Padiachi of IDEC. And then later on he says, having regard to the sensitive nature of Lieutenant General Kumalo's role, a condition empowering Mr. Padiachi to have any access to crime intelligence information is unwarranted. It compromises state security. Lieutenant General Kumalo has applied for the bail conditions to be amended, but the hearing of this application to amend has been postponed on numerous occasions. So just in relation to, we're going to deal with Lieutenant General Kumalo's arrest and the charges against him. Yeah. You deal with it from paragraph 56 onwards, allegations against Mr. Brian Padiachi.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and members. To go back to the assertion that you made, Council, I am aware...
Not that I make.
That General Mkhwanazi makes that you've put to me. The assertion being that Mr. Padiachi would have and be allowed to have access to CI and documents. It is, I think it's incorrectly interpreted. That condition dealt with, and mainly because we have witnesses at crime intelligence, and those witnesses had indicated that they had been intimidated and victimized. So the condition for them not going to CI was to ensure that the witnesses were not intimidated. Mr. Padiachi would not have been allowed, to be clear, to access any documents from crime intelligence. We would have had to follow if after that one identified that there were documents from crime intelligence that were required. Chair, we would have had to follow the process we had followed initially, which would have been to issue a Section 28 subpoena to the National Police Commissioner. No one would have been allowed to go to CI, engage any personnel, or take on any documents. And when it comes to Mr. Padiachi, it is Mr. Padiachi who, in fact, would call Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi to let him know that he was going to be in his province. It was him who engaged with the Lieutenant General mainly. They met, they would have talked. They had meetings, they had WhatsApp exchanges about Mr. Padiachi going down to KZN and what it is that he would require. And General Mkhwanazi was always willing to assist and or to facilitate. I'm not sure what might have gone wrong because I'm not aware of anything having gone wrong. But when the allegations are made, Honorable Chair and members, that Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi cannot understand what Padiachi is doing at IDEC. I found Mr. Padiachi at the ID He had come to the ID and had been sought after by my predecessor, Advocate Hermione Cronje, and he remained then at IDEC. He did undergo a detective course. He has conducted several investigations in his time in the South African Police Services. He wasn't only at crime intelligence. We do refer, Honorable Chair and members, from paragraphs 62.1 up to paragraph 62.3 of specific matters that Mr. Padiachi dealt with as an investigator within the South African Police Services in his time at the South African Police Services. So the assertion that he's got no investigating experience and no one knows what he's doing there is incorrect. He has the requisite qualifications, he's had the requisite experience, and he was at IDEC from sometime in 2021, me having taken office in March of 2022, and has conducted investigations as part of different teams that were doing investigations in IDEC.
Thank you. Honourable Chair, may I just request a short adjournment? There's some, you would have seen some activity, there's some documents that I wish to refer the witness to, and which is not part of Ms. Johnson's statement.
That
so that committee members...
that is granted, SC. We will come back at 11:45.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thank you.